Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the war with Iran could end within weeks without the need for ground troops.
We're going to destroy their Navy, we're going to destroy their Air Force, and we are going to significantly destroy their missile launchers so they can never hide behind these things to get a nuclear weapon. We are achieving all those objectives. We are ahead of schedule on most of them, and we can achieve them without any ground troops, without any.
We're live in Dubai, Tehran and Ramallah, but we're going to start in Yemen. Yusuf Mahdi is joining us now from Sana'a. So the Houthis, I understand, have just released that statement we were talking about. What else have they been saying?
Well, I spoke with a military expert who tells me that the Ansar Allah Houthis' position in this war will consist of 3 phases. The first phase is to launch continuous attacks against Israeli military positions until Israel stops its military role in the attacks against Iran. That's the first phase. The second phase will consist of imposing a naval blockade on all Israeli-linked ships attempting to cross Bab al-Mandeb. And as you know, all imported goods into the port of Eilat goes through Bab al-Mandeb. In fact, 30% of Israel's trade and all imported goods cross Bab al-Mandeb and cross through to the Red Sea. Israel racked up a total of $80 million in debt because of the Ansar Allah Houthis military attacks from 2024 to 25. They also were effective in ultimately announcing the closure of the port of Eilat and also the port of Haifa, all because of the Ansar Allah Houthis military attacks against all Israeli-linked vessels and all Israeli-linked companies attempting to cross Bab al-Mandeb. The second phase, as I mentioned, is imposing a naval blockade on all Israeli maritime assets. The third phase will consist of attacking U.S. military bases if the U.S. gets involved. So if the U.S. decides to engage in military operations with Israel against Ansar Allah Houthi positions, against any attacks here in Yemen, then that's when the Yemeni group will begin targeting U.S. military bases in Saudi Arabia, in Oman, and across the region.
Yusuf, thank you very much indeed. Yusuf Mahdi there joining us live from Sana'a. We're going to go to Nida Ibrahim in Ramallah. This is opening up, of course, a third front for Israel, putting additional pressure not only on the Israeli government, but also, of course, on the Israeli people who have been being targeted by attacks from Hezbollah in Lebanon, from Iran, and now from the Houthis in Yemen.
Yes, indeed. And these attacks from Iran and Hezbollah, for example, just since last night until this morning, have kept Israelis going to shelters at least 18 times as these ballistic missiles as well as drones were coming into different parts of Israel as a result of continuing Hezbollah and Iran pressure on Israelis. Now, another front. Yes, the Israeli army wants to show that it can and had intercepted the missile coming in from the Houthis fired into southern Israel. But at the same time, it's a public concern that needs to be addressed. Specifically, that we've been seeing how some interceptions fail, how some cluster munitions are able to cause a lot of damage, how sometimes the detection of these missiles becomes a bit late, so the Israelis do not have enough time to go to shelters and fortified places. That could also lead to casualties. At the same time, Israel wants to show that it's ready on all fronts. Now it's a third front being added to the war. And if you talk to Israeli military officials, Israeli government officials, you would see that behind closed doors, they are interested in maintaining the pressure on Iran. As we've been reporting in the past few days, Israel has backtracked publicly on its remarks on the ability to crack and to topple the Iranian regime as a result of the continued attacks. But deep down, they want to keep attacking Iran. And any de-escalation does not serve these Israeli goals. They want to attack not just the regime, but as we've seen, also facilities inside Iran that belong to the state. They want to also hit strategic areas that could potentially drive the population to a popular revolt after the war ends. This is the key word that we've been hearing from many officials in the past few days. After the war, meaning that they are betting and hoping that they could continue with their maximum pressure on the regime, on the Iranian facilities, on the strategic assets of.
Okay, we seem to have lost our sound there from Nida in Ramallah. We're going to go to Tokida Asadi, who's in Tehran for us. Tokida, has there been any response from Iran to the statement that we've heard from the Houthis in Yemen?
Well, actually, so far there's no official response from Tehran in that regard, but we can say with a considerable amount of certainty that the move is going to be welcomed here in Tehran. But speaking of the context, we have to keep in mind that over the past months and years, we hear from Tehran that they're saying that Houthis in Yemen are our close allies, but the system of decision-making and the courses of action that they take are quite independent, and they're doing their own decisions, they're doing their own actions in that regard. But it's still, again, speaking of the geopolitical context, of course, Iran is going to interpret it as a very significant development. Previously, a couple of weeks ago, I may say that we've got an official source telling Al Jazeera that there is a possibility for closure of another strategically important choke point without giving a name about which choke point that would be. But right now, after the leverage that Iran tries to practice when it comes to closure of the Strait of Hormuz to the adversaries, according to what we hear from Iranians, now there is another choke point, I would say second most important choke point in the region when it comes to oil and when it comes to energy market and when it comes to, in a broader context, the global economy. And if that's the case, I mean, if Houthis end up in the closure of Bab al-Mandeb, obviously there is going to be another leverage for Iran and its allies to be practiced in the middle of this ongoing airstrikes that Iran is facing. And on that, I would say we have been witnessing the continuation of these airstrikes over the few hours in the country.
And Tohin, I'm going to come back to you in a moment, but I want to bring in Azim Basravi, our correspondent, who's in Dubai for us. What does this involvement by the Houthis mean for Gulf states, which have been on the sidelines of this?
Well, this is yet another example of what many Gulf states have been warning about since well before this war began, that the longer it goes on, once it begins, the longer it goes on, it will only become more expansive and more complex. And the Gulf states have gone up against the Houthis before. And this will certainly be something that will be raising the alarm. In 2014, Yemen's civil war began. In 2015, the Saudi-led U.S. and Western-backed intervention into Yemen saw them embroiled in the civil war, in a fight they did not have to get into that lasted for years and cost Saudi Arabia, the UAE, a lot in terms of blood and treasure. They extricated themselves from that, but not without it exacting a cost. And the Houthis, a much weaker force, went up against a coalition of 8 or more, backed by the US, backed by the UK, backed by every major weapons manufacturer in the world, airstrikes happening constantly. And they fought them to a stalemate. That conflict remains unresolved, but closed for now. There is very real reason to believe that Saudi Arabia will be taking this as a major alarm bell, not wanting to restart another conflict on its southern border. And we have seen what the Houthis have been capable of in the past in support of Gaza, saying in support of Palestinians. They have led attacks on commercial shipping lanes in the Red Sea, in the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, to great effect. We've seen those images of helicopters landing on cargo vessels, commandeering them, of the Houthis blowing up oil tankers and cargo vessels in those waters. That's been going on for some time. Again, it abated, but it could restart again. And that's what this conflict, or the Houthis entering this conflict, it represents enormous risk, not just to the region, but to the global economy. Now, we have to remind people that they have successfully launched missiles at Israel in the past. They've targeted the airport in Tel Aviv. They've targeted airports in Dubai and Abu Dhabi as well during the course of the civil war, of that Saudi-led intervention that I mentioned. Not to the scale that we've seen since Iran began retaliatory attacks on the GCC, but still of enormous concern that this conflict is expanding, of enormous concern to the GCC, that there is yet another paradigm shift in the security on the peninsula and in the region.
Zain, stick around for a second because I do want to come back to you in a couple of moments. But let me bring in Nida in Ramallah again. As we were describing before, we lost your sound earlier on, but we've got you back now. Israel being hit now on 3 fronts, from Hezbollah in Lebanon, but also from Yemen as well to the south. But also, of course, Israel still being hit by retaliatory strikes from Iran. What's been happening there?
Well, the Iranian-fired missiles have killed 1 person late on Friday as a result of these cluster munitions that continue to worry and disturb Israelis, as the ability to intercept them remains limited as they splinter across and go into areas that sometimes are far 1 kilometer or a few kilometers away from the initial site. That is adding strain on the Israeli aerial defense systems. And now with the Houthis entering the war, that could also add an additional strain on the war. Of course, this is when we're talking about the public and the way they're dealing with this war. But when we talk to Israeli military officials, when we hear what they've been saying to U.S. officials or to Israeli media behind closed doors, they continue to endorse the war. They want to create a situation where there is an escalation to kind of sabotage what the U.S. president has been talking about, which is an attempt to reach a deal with Iran to head towards a de-escalation. And I'm reading now, just in the past few minutes, some analysis by Israeli media who say that maybe the attack now and the decision for Yemen's Houthi group to join the war is as a result of the Israeli escalation to attack nuclear facilities inside Iran, which has been seen as an escalation despite the U.S. attempts to de-escalate specifically in that region. When we talk about the U.S. president extending the ban on, or the fact that the U.S. decided not to hit any nuclear facilities or power plants inside Iran. So that is seen in Israel as a retaliation by al-Houthi group in an attempt to support the Iranian position and also put more pressure on the Americans and remind them of Bab al-Mandeb Strait, the fact that this could disrupt even more shipment coming into the region, specifically when it comes to Israel, but also when it comes to air flight carriers as well. So all of that is being weighed in Israel as another escalation. But again, as we've been saying, Israel does not hide that it's intending to continue striking Iran, and any escalation in the region serves that goal.
Nida Ibrahim there in Ramallah. Nida, thank you very much indeed.